After I paid for my dad's surgery, he left it to my stepbrother saying, "You're young, you'll bounce back. He needs the head start." Stepbrother said, "Looks like all that loyalty was just practice." I made sure the head start turned into a dead end. I was standing in the hospital parking lot, holding the transfer receipt from the surgery I just paid for, $32,000 I didn't really have, when my stepbrother Tyler leaned against my dad's truck and grinned like he'd just won something. "Guess Dad left me the house," he said, flicking his cigarette. "He figured you'd be fine without it. You're young, you'll bounce back." His words. I actually laughed at first, thought it was some sick joke. But when I looked up and saw Dad's signature on that notarized paper, the same hand I'd watched tremble in pain 2 weeks earlier, my throat went dry. I drained my savings, maxed my credit, even sold my car to cover his heart surgery after his insurance denied it. He said I was the only one he could count on. He said Tyler wasn't built for responsibility. And yet here we were, me on foot, broke, exhausted, while Tyler leaned against what used to be our home like he owned it. Dad had died 3 days earlier. No warning, no goodbye, just a phone call from the hospital saying his heart gave out in his sleep. I'd been numb since then until this. Now everything inside me burned cold. I asked Tyler when the hell Dad made that decision. "Couple days before the surgery," he said casually. "Said you'd understand. Said you're tough, like your mom was." Then he smirked. "Looks like all that loyalty was just practice." That line broke something in me. For 2 years, I'd been the one driving Dad to his appointments, paying bills when he couldn't, repairing that damn roof he kept saying we'd fix together. Tyler only showed up when he needed money or a place to crash. But somehow he ended up with the house. I didn't say a word. I just walked past him inside and stood in the living room, the same one where Dad used to watch the Browns lose every Sunday, where I'd carried him to the couch after his first heart attack. The place already looked different. Tyler had boxes stacked near the doorway, music playing from a Bluetooth speaker, beer cans on the table. "Don't worry, bro," he called after me. "You'll land on your feet. You always do." I stared at the framed photo of me, Dad, and Tyler fishing when I was 15. I remembered how Dad said back then, "You boys gotta look out for each other." I think that's when the idea hit me. Not all at once. More like a slow realization that I wasn't going to bounce back. I was going to make sure he didn't bounce at all. Tyler thought he'd just walked into an inheritance. What he didn't know was that he'd also walked into something else. Something I'd been quietly setting up ever since Dad's first hospital scare. And when it all unfolded, he'd finally understand what practice really meant. Dad wasn't always like that. For most of my life, he was the kind of man people respected, quiet, dependable, the kind who fixed his own problems instead of talking about them. He raised me alone after Mom left when I was 6. Then, when I was 20, he remarried a woman named Sheila, and that's how Tyler came into the picture. Tyler was her son from a previous marriage. Same age as me, but couldn't be more different. I was the one working 2 jobs to get through community college. Tyler dropped out of high school and got into business, which was his word for selling stolen car parts and vape pens out of his trunk. Dad always tried to treat us equally, but it wasn't the same. I was his boy. Tyler was Sheila's project. But after she died of cancer 4 years ago, Dad started feeling guilty. He'd say things like, "Tyler's all alone now, he doesn't have what you have." I think he meant drive, discipline, whatever. But guilt changes people. When Dad's health started going downhill, that guilt turned into something else. He didn't want Tyler to feel left out. So when he needed help after the first heart attack, I handled everything: bills, medication, doctor visits. Tyler would pop in once every few weeks, drop off fast food, and call that spending time. Still, Dad defended him. "He's trying," he'd say. "He just needs direction." Then the second heart attack hit, way worse than the first. The doctors said surgery was the only option. Insurance wouldn't cover it, and Dad was too proud to ask for charity or loans. I didn't think twice. I emptied my savings, took a personal loan, and sold my 2009 Honda Civic. I figured I'd rebuild. It was my dad. He cried when I showed him the bank transfer, said I'd saved his life, told me he'd make it right once he recovered. I didn't do it for repayment. I just wanted him alive. The surgery was scheduled for a Friday morning. The day before, I walked into his hospital room and saw Tyler sitting by his bed, whispering. They both stopped talking the second I came in. I thought nothing of it then. Dad asked me to step out and give them a minute. Later that night, he called and said, "Son, I've been thinking about how to split things up fairly." I told him not to worry about that, we'd handle it later. But he said, "No, I need to do it while I can still sign things. You'll understand one day." I didn't. I found out after the funeral that he'd rewritten his will the day before surgery, leaving the house, the only real asset he had, to Tyler. The lawyer said Dad's reasoning was Tyler needs a head start. "You're young, you'll bounce back." It was the most backhanded compliment I'd ever received. That night, I sat in my empty apartment staring at the loan paperwork, realizing I was now $29,000 in debt with nothing to show for it. Not even a home to visit when I missed him. But what really haunted me wasn't the money. It was that conversation I'd walked in on, the one where Dad and Tyler stopped talking the second I entered. Something about that moment started itching at me. Tyler didn't just luck out. He engineered something. And if I was right about that, then this wasn't about inheritance. It was about manipulation. And I was going to find proof. After the funeral, everyone scattered. A few family friends offered hollow condolences and casserole dishes, then vanished. Tyler moved into Dad's house within a week, acting like he'd been living there all along. I told him I'd need to pick up a few of my things. Dad's tools, old photos, some personal stuff, and he said, "Sure, man, just call first. I'm kinda reorganizing." That was my first real clue. Reorganizing. Dad's workshop was the one place he never let anyone touch. I waited until the next afternoon, when I knew Tyler would be at his warehouse job, and drove over. The key still worked. Inside, the house smelled different, cheap cologne and weed. The living room TV was already replaced with a massive flat screen, and Dad's recliner was gone. In the workshop, I started going through drawers. First, just looking for old photos. Then I found a folder marked medical. Inside were copies of hospital bills, insurance letters, and prescription receipts. But there was one document that wasn't supposed to be there. A draft of Dad's previous will. The one he'd written 6 months before surgery. That version left the house to me. I sat there for a long time staring at the 2 lines that sealed it. "My son Daniel has carried my burdens when I could not. This home is his." That's when I knew something had changed. And it wasn't just guilt. I started digging deeper. Checked the surgery invoices, insurance claim notes, and call logs. Then I noticed something odd. The day before Dad changed his will, there was a recorded phone call between him, Tyler, and a legal advisor listed as our Jeffries. Jeffries was a local lawyer. But when I called his office, the secretary said he hadn't handled any estate work for my father. Not recently, not ever. So I went to the courthouse and requested a copy of the will and its notarization form. The signature and seal were legit, but the notary listed was someone named K. Rami. I found her through public records. She worked part-time at a title office, and she was Tyler's ex-girlfriend. That's when I stopped feeling sad and started feeling focused. I kept digging. Found out Tyler had been visiting Dad almost daily the week before surgery. He told everyone he was helping with errands. But what he was actually doing was getting Dad's passwords, handling his mail, setting up automatic bill payments. One of those automatic payments was for his own credit card. It was too much to be coincidence. Tyler didn't just manipulate Dad into changing the will. He'd been slowly draining him, emotionally and financially, while pretending to take care of things. I remember sitting in my car outside the courthouse that afternoon, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. The anger was clean now, cold, sharp. Dad had been too sick and too trusting to see what Tyler was doing. And I'd been too busy saving him to notice I was being robbed right alongside him. I didn't tell anyone what I'd found. Not yet. Because this wasn't something I wanted to talk about. This was something I wanted to end. I wasn't sure how yet. But I knew Tyler had made one mistake. He'd underestimated how far the responsible one would go when he finally stopped forgiving. A week after I found that fake notary trail, I got the proof I needed by accident. I was at my apartment, half asleep, scrolling through my email when a message from the hospital billing department popped up. Subject line, outstanding authorization request, patient, Robert Callahan. My dad. The timestamp? 2 days before his surgery. The email had been CC'd to both me and Tyler's email address, apparently from when I'd listed him as an emergency contact months ago. The body of the message said, awaiting confirmation from family regarding patient's treatment and financial consent. Please confirm payer authorization before procedure. There was an attached audio file labeled Colander Circuit Recording MP3. I clicked it. At first, it was just the nurse's voice, polite and scripted. Mr. Callahan, I just need verbal consent to proceed with the surgery and confirmation that your family understands financial liability if the insurance appeal fails. Then Dad's voice, weak, tired. Yeah, my son Daniel's covering it. He said he'd take care of it. But then another voice came in, Tyler's. Confident, steady, manipulative. Yeah, he already arranged the transfer. Just make sure the will's updated the way Dad said. He doesn't want any confusion later. The nurse hesitated. I'm sorry, sir. I can't discuss. Dad interrupted, sounding nervous. It's fine. He's helping me get things in order. Tyler again, quietly. Yeah, we don't want Dan thinking he's got to take on everything. He's already stressed. I'll handle the estate paperwork today. Dad coughed, said. He'll understand. He's young. He'll bounce back. Then Tyler laughed. That laugh. I paused the recording right there. I didn't need to hear more. It was enough to prove Tyler had coached Dad, probably pressured him into rewriting the will while using my name and money to make it all happen. That wasn't guilt, that was grooming. I spent the next 2 days in silence, listening to that clip over and over until I stopped shaking when I heard it. Tyler's words weren't random. He knew exactly what he was doing. He'd known how to twist Dad's guilt, how to make me look like the self-sufficient one so Dad would feel justified in giving Tyler the house. He'd weaponized every good thing I ever did. The rage didn't come as a storm this time. Came as a plan. I made 3 phone calls that week, 1 to a lawyer, 1 to a friend in property management, and 1 to an old buddy from high school who'd become a mortgage broker. Each conversation gave me a piece of what I needed. And then I did one more thing. I called Tyler. Told him I wanted to make peace. Said I found some old financial stuff of Dad's and thought he should have it. He sounded surprised but pleased. Glad you're letting it go, man, he said. Family's family. Yeah. Family's family. Until one of them decides to cut your throat while smiling. The next day, I walked into that house one last time, calm, polite, carrying a folder. Inside it was everything, the fake notary record, the audio file, and one new document I'd had drawn up. Tyler didn't know it yet, but his head start was already over. When the anger cooled into something that felt more like calculation, I knew I couldn't just scream and throw beer cans through windows. You don't beat a con with theatrics, you beat a con by removing the stage. So I made a list. Not a grand, cinematic list. A practical one. Lawyer. Paper trail. Banks. Employer. Court. Public record. The little things that make scams illegible suddenly very legible in a courtroom. First call was to the lawyer I'd found online who specialized in probate disputes. He didn't even ask for money up front. Said he'd work on contingency if we had evidence of undue influence or fraud. I sent him the audio file of the hospital call, the fake notary connection, and the draft will I'd found. He called back 2 hours later and said 3 words I hadn't heard since Dad's funeral. We can freeze it. That's what we did. He filed an emergency petition to put a temporary injunction on the estate and to impound the house keys. The judge signed overnight. Suddenly Tyler couldn't sell, refinance, or legally change anything with the property. The house that had been his new kingdom turned into a legal shrine, inaccessible and officially contested. Next, I went to the banks. My mortgage broker friend helped me map out all the accounts and suspicious automatic payments Tyler had set up using Dad's mail. A lot of it was petty, credit cards, streaming services, the occasional loan, but some of it crossed a bright red line. Several withdrawals and charge transfers had the same pattern as identity theft. We filed police reports and fraud claims. Banks don't move fast for grief, but they move fast for forged signatures and criminal investigations. Within days, 2 of Tyler's biggest bills were flagged for reversal and investigation. His credit cards closed. His one source of fun money evaporated. Then there was the social piece. I didn't want to humiliate him, I wanted leverage. So I packaged everything the lawyer said was admissible. The recorded consent call, the notary tie, copies of altered bills, and a timeline showing Tyler's visits the week before surgery. I sent it to Tyler's boss at the warehouse and to the non-emergency line of the county prosecutor. I also emailed a short, fact-only note to a local reporter who covers crooked small-town scams, because reporters amplify pressure in ways subpoenas don't. Within a week, Tyler had calls from HR asking about recent allegations, a detective scheduling a time to chat, and a process server dropping off the injunction notice at his door. I watched him from my car once as he opened the envelope, face changing from swagger to confusion to raw, bladed panic. He tried to rage at me that night, yelling across the street, threats thin and desperate, but the papers he'd been served were cold and official. He couldn't rage away an injunction. I also quietly secured some small protections for myself. I lodged a personal claim on the estate for the medical payments I'd made. Legally, what I'd paid for Dad's care could be reimbursable from the estate. I didn't expect to recover the whole amount, but getting even a portion would be more vindication than any Facebook post. What none of them, Tyler, the reporter, the banks, knew was the last piece of my plan. I'd arranged a hearing date where the whole thing would be aired in court. I wanted Tyler to stand there and watch the audio play in front of a judge. I wanted the notary's connection exposed under oath. I wanted the town to see the man who'd smiled over Dad's casket and taken a house like it was his birthright. He had options, run, fight, lie, but he had to choose one. And choices reveal character. The night before the hearing, I sat on my old apartment floor with Dad's transfer receipt folded in my hand and a beer sweating on the table. I felt empty in one way and alive in another. I had done the practical work. Now the rest was out of my hands. At 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was Tyler. The message said only, "You crossed the line. You'll regret this." I looked at the injunction paperwork, then at the audio file, and for the first time since the surgery I smiled. Not because I enjoyed it, but because finally, everything that had been hidden was about to be forced into light. Tomorrow was the hearing. The courthouse smelled like disinfectant and old paper, that sterile kind of air that makes you feel like justice might exist if you can just sit still long enough. I got there early, wearing the same suit I'd worn to Dad's funeral. Tyler walked in 15 minutes late, half-tucked shirt, wearing sunglasses inside. He looked wrecked, dark circles, jittery movements. His lawyer, a cheap local guy who probably charged by the smirk, trailed behind him. When the judge entered, everyone stood. My lawyer leaned in and whispered, "Keep your face neutral no matter what happens." I nodded, but I didn't know how much control I really had left. The hearing started calmly, procedural stuff. Then came the evidence presentation. My lawyer queued up the hospital recording. Tyler crossed his arms, trying to look bored, but the second his voice filled the room, that smug, manipulative tone, he froze. You could feel the shift. Even the bailiff looked up. Then the lawyer presented the notary connection. Photos, text messages, and social media screenshots between Tyler and his ex, the notary, from the same week the will was changed. That's when Tyler leaned over to whisper something to his lawyer, and the lawyer's face changed color. He hadn't known. That was the first real crack. The judge called for a recess, and we stepped into the hallway. My lawyer went to make copies, and that's when Tyler approached me. "You don't understand," he said, voice shaking. "It wasn't supposed to go like this." "Like what?" I asked. "Dad wanted to change it before, I just helped him actually do it. I didn't force him." I raised an eyebrow. "You literally faked a notary." He ran a hand through his hair. "She wasn't fake. Okay? She was a notary. He stopped mid-sentence, jaw-locking. "It doesn't matter. You're not getting that house." He stormed off before I could answer. The judge came back after recess and announced that the house and all related assets were officially frozen pending a deeper investigation into fraud and undue influence. Basically, Tyler couldn't touch a thing until the case was resolved. My lawyer leaned back, satisfied. That's step one, he whispered. But step two came faster than either of us expected. 3 days later, I got a call from the mortgage broker friend, the one who'd been helping me trace payments. He said, "Hey, your stepbrother's house just got flagged in an active foreclosure file." "What?" "Yeah," he said. "Apparently, there's a second mortgage on the property. Taken out 3 weeks ago. Guess whose name's on it? Tyler." He'd gone to one of those shady online lenders and used the house, the one that wasn't even fully transferred yet, as collateral for a $75,000 personal loan. The kind with 19% interest and daily penalties. The loan had already defaulted because the injunction froze the property, meaning Tyler had trapped himself. I drove by the house that night. The porch light was off. His car was gone. Through the front window, I saw moving boxes half-packed and piles of junk mail on the counter. The head start Dad gave him had already turned into a free fall. But as much as I wanted to celebrate, something about what Tyler said in the hallway kept replaying in my head. It wasn't supposed to go like this. It stuck because there was fear in his voice. Not anger, not guilt, fear. And then I remembered something strange from months earlier, the day before Dad's surgery, when I'd walked in and seen Tyler whispering by the hospital bed. I thought I'd interrupted them, but now I wasn't so sure. Dad had looked scared then too. A thought crept in, one I didn't want to believe. What if Tyler hadn't just manipulated Dad emotionally? What if he'd done something worse? Something that made sure Dad never woke up to change his mind? The thought kept clawing at me for days, that maybe Dad's death hadn't been just a surgery complication. I tried to push it down, but the harder I ignored it, the louder it got. So I did what I'd been doing since this all started. I went looking for facts. The hospital had a patient record portal that still listed me as Dad's secondary contact. Late one night, I logged in. There wasn't much I hadn't already seen: the surgery summary, medication history, the time of death note. But buried in a scanned file labeled pre-op intake, family acknowledgement, I saw something odd. A line signed by both Dad and Tyler acknowledging the medication management the night before surgery. Dad was on blood thinners, and the dosage had to be adjusted before the operation. Normally, that was handled by the nurse. But the note said, medication provided at home by family member under nurse's phone supervision. My stomach dropped. I remembered that night, I'd worked a late shift. Tyler was the one who stayed with Dad. I called the hospital and asked who the nurse on duty was that night. They couldn't share details without an official request, so I got my lawyer to file one. When the report came back, it said the nurse had called to confirm dosage and spoke to Tyler, not Dad. He'd told her he'd handled it. I showed it to the lawyer. He just stared at the paper and said quietly, "If he gave the wrong dose, it could have thinned your dad's blood too much before surgery. Internal bleeding, cardiac arrest. It would look like natural complications." Took me a full minute to realize I wasn't breathing. Tyler hadn't just stolen the house. He'd made sure the one person who could take it back never got the chance. The next day, I drove to his warehouse job. The parking lot was half empty, rain streaking the asphalt. He came out back to smoke. Didn't see me at first. I stood there in the rain until he looked up. His face went pale when he saw me. "What the hell do you want?" I held up the intake report. "You gave him the meds that night." He froze. "So what? You doubled his dose, didn't you?" He looked away, flicked the cigarette, said, "He was supposed to take them. I just followed directions." "You didn't follow anything. You wanted him weak. You wanted it to look like the surgery killed him." He didn't answer, just rubbed his face like he was tired of pretending. Finally, he muttered, "You think you were the only one who wanted to be free of him? He was dying anyway. I just made sure the timing worked out." It wasn't even said with guilt, just annoyance, like I'd caught him cheating on a test. He thought he was helping me. Tyler went on. "You had everything lined up. The job, the degrees, the savings. I had nothing. He told me he wished he could fix it before he went. So I fixed it for him." That was his logic. He'd given Dad the wrong dose on purpose. Not because of money, not because of rage, but because in his twisted head, it was a favor. It hit me then how cold he really was. He hadn't cried at the funeral because he'd already mourned him the night before. He hadn't cared about the surgery because it was never about saving Dad. It was about clearing the board. He flicked another cigarette, voice flat. He's gone, man. Nothing's going to change that. But he was wrong about that. Something was going to change. I didn't shout. I didn't threaten. I just looked him dead in the eyes and said, "You're right. He's gone. But you're about to join him. Just not the way you think." Then I walked away, soaked, shaking, and absolutely certain of what came next. I didn't want to be the kind of person who turned grief into a show. But there's a difference between revenge and justice, and I'd learned to tell them apart. The hearing where the audio played in court was only the beginning. Once the recording was on the record, nothing stayed small anymore. My lawyer took copies to the district attorney. The DA actually listened, and then put together a team. They served subpoenas for hospital records, pulled the pharmacy logs, and reopened the pre-op intake file. Forensic toxicology came back faster than anyone expected. Traces consistent with supertherapeutic anticoagulant levels picked up in the immediate pre-op blood work. The hospital's nurse interviews lined up. The pattern of phone calls and the notary tie made it look deliberate, not negligent. I thought I'd feel triumphant when the DA first charged Tyler with fraud and elder abuse. Instead, I felt hollow, like someone had cut an opening in my chest where anger used to sit. But there was relief, too. A slow, solid thing that grew when the press started calling and the community's whispers turned into questions. The local reporter I'd nudged ran a careful piece the week the indictment dropped. Facts, dates, documents that clipped laugh at the hospital. People who'd once praised Tyler for stepping up started asking why they hadn't seen it. Tyler tried to run. He sold TVs, pawned tools, tried to cash out accounts. The injunction kept the house tied up. The shady lender's foreclosure moved faster than he could. He ended up living in his truck for a month, showing up at court with a haircut and a fake smile that couldn't hide how small he'd become. The mortgage company foreclosed. The house went into receivership. The bank recovered some money. The estate settled my claim for a fraction of the loan I'd taken out. But the DA's office made it clear. Money could be clawed back slowly and maybe never fully. That wasn't the important part. What mattered was seeing him in a courtroom again, this time shackled to the reality of his choices. He pleaded bargaining and regret, but the prosecutor had the hospital logs, the pharmacy records, the notary statements, and the audio. Under oath, Tyler's voice lost the easy confidence I'd heard in the recording. When the jury came back, guilty on multiple counts, his face crumpled in a way I'd only ever seen in fairly small men when they realize there aren't any more lies left to tell. The judgment didn't bring Dad back. It didn't erase the feeling of him handing me the last thank you the night I wired the money. But it did restore something practical. The house was reclaimed by the estate and sold. The sale paid off part of the debt I'd taken out and covered a small trust in Dad's name that would go to the community clinic where he'd volunteered. Tyler went to prison for a few years, not as long as I wanted, but long enough that he had to live inside the consequences of what he'd built. I paid my lawyer from whatever the estate returned and kept my job. I learned to sleep again without the tight, choking fear that had been my constant companion. I visited the clinic once, left flowers on the bench where Dad used to sit, and read the plaque they put up in his honor. It said nothing about the bills or the will or the awful last months. It said he'd been a man who fixed things for people. That was enough. People sometimes ask if I felt satisfied. Revenge didn't taste like triumph. It tasted like cleaning a wound and finding a scar. I thought about Tyler in his cell sometimes, not with rage, but with the hollow curiosity of someone who's watched a person reveal everything they truly were. The town moved on. The house got painted a safer color. The TV shows my dad loved kept losing games. Life, incompetently and kindly, kept going. On nights when I still woke up angry, I'd take out the transfer receipt and fold it the same way I'd folded it the night I handed it over. The small, stupid ritual, but it's mine. I don't get to unspend that money, and I don't get to bring my father back. But I did make sure the head start he'd been given turned into a dead end. And that, in its own broken way, was enough. He thought loyalty was practice. Turns out it was a lesson.